Australia Day is directed by Kriv Stenders, who's a Brisbane-born director that doesn't seem to stop after one film and think for a decade. He's the director of Red Dog True Blue, Kill Me Three Times, starring Simon Pegg, and Boxing Day. Australia Day stars Brian Brown, not to be confused with Australia, which also features Brian Brown. There are three storylines running at once. Brian Brown and the Chinese girl, the Aboriginal police crash and investigation, and the group of guys holding a hostage that may or may not have raped one of their sisters. Matt LaNeves from Offspring has a small role, but the star here I think is Sean Keenan from the new Wake in Fright, Puberty Blues, and he played young Paul Hogan in Hogs. I feel like he's going to be our next big export. There's just something about him and it's a bit of an X factor. It's hard to quantify. It's hard to imagine, but there's obviously a very racist population in Australia. We've previously reviewed Down Under on the podcast, and it tackles some of the same ground as this, but with humour. Here it's very bleak. Characters here are regularly kidnapped and assaulted, and it's a very unsafe Australia. David Stratton described this as Run Lola Run meets Gran Torino, but I think there's issues with the Brian Brown character that don't make him so redeemable. At one point in the film, all three stories are people chasing each other, and where it feels action-packed, and that's great, it does throw in the action straight away from the beginning of the film. It is also a bit exhausting without giving you much time to breathe. From a practical point of view, there's some things in this film that I found frustrating. At one point, an Aboriginal police officer is in pursuit of an Aboriginal girl. A man kidnaps her and keeps her in a back room, and when she finally breaks into that room, the girl is just jumped out the window and she's on the run. And then instead of chasing her down, she has a long conversation with this kidnapper. And then when the police officer goes to the street, she sees April, the Aboriginal girl, casually walking away into the distance, so that she doesn't lose her scent and the chase can continue throughout the film. Very convenient for these characters not to have lost each other. There's a real gang mentality to the whites versus Muslims that they have on the screen. You don't really get to know anybody's names. They do drop Dean's name as the ringleader, and the mother, played by Naveen Hanna, who I've interviewed on the podcast before, says make it right, meaning beat up these white guys. So it does kind of push violence as the answer for a while. It's not a subtle film, pointing out that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Spoilers for Australia Day here. I really have to discuss something right at the end of the film. Brian Brown plays Matt LaNeves' father, and Matt LaNeves is a cop. So when Brian Brown discovers this prostitution ring with underage Chinese girls, he doesn't report it to his son, who's a police officer. So what's strange is Brian Brown's character kind of just investigates himself. He's just a guy passing through, and he could easily pass this on to his cop son. Now the weirdest bit is that Brian Brown's character wants to shoot himself in front of the Minister of Agriculture. He set himself up with a window and a sniper rifle, and he can see the Minister of Agriculture doing a speech right across the way. But then the Chinese girl knocks on the door and steals his gun. He very easily could have ignored her if he was serious about this, yet he opens the door for the girl and tells her to go away. Now what I found frustrating is, after his death in the film, which is kind of this taxi driver moment where he goes to save the girl and release all of the Chinese girls being held in this prostitution ring, he has a suicide note that he previously left because he was going to shoot himself in front of the Minister of Agriculture. But you don't shoot yourself with a sniper rifle. The film ends with a very heavy voiceover of Brian Brown saying things like, "Maybe I was fighting for the wrong things. I hope it makes a difference. I hope you can forgive me." And saying, "I know you'll do better than I did." AKA, dear audience, please do better than our generation has done with these race relations. It is not a subtle film. Which I guess is uncomfortable, and I guess is what he wants. But it feels like everything is the extreme version of what you would do. I think ultimately there's a lot to like about this film. But whereas Brian Brown's character appears to be the moral compass, he actually isn't, and I think that fact really changed his storyline for me. But it does mean there's nobody for you to root for. You don't sort of care about these characters because they all have racist elements and are violent. It kind of says that everybody is racist in Australia too, which I didn't like. But on the plus side, Australians keep making films where nothing really happens, or that it's a very small story arc, and this feels big. I love the fact that the director has continued to work, and I look forward to seeing what he does next.
Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please hit the subscribe button. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Check out our podcast at www.podmeifyoucan.com.